My friends, what lays before you is the myriad knowledge of an unfathomable universe. Join our intrepid remembrancers as they explore the heresy as history. From deep within the farthest reaches of the great library of Tiska, we are the Heresy Grad School. So said the War Master in his wisdom. Go forth, my sons, and illuminate them.
Retribution is the most ancient of laws, that first order of primordial justice, that an eye be claimed for an eye, a life for a life, one atrocity heaped upon another in relentless bloody arithmetic. There are those who would say it was bred in mankind's bones, that it is a principle that came before our most distant ancestors even had the words to express its measure. Vengeance is in our nature, and it will not be denied. So has it ever been with humanity, so it was with those who sprung from humanity's stock, so it was with the Space Marines. As the aftershocks of the Great Betrayal and the tragedy of Istvan were joined in the blows of fresh massacre and perfidy at Calth and Fal and Mars, and in time even those fell echoes were drowned out by the roar of a war that tore like a hurricane across the galaxy, a war in which every life lost was but a drop of blood in a torrent the likes of which had never been seen. Every life lost cried out for vengeance, for retribution. Lost in this red cataract were great battles and petty skirmishes without number, of which only the greatest now remain to the minds of most who lived through those dark years. The apocalypse of Beta Garman, the great Titan death, the shock of the wolf cull, all but forgotten and unknown besides these battles, whose infamy will last 1,000 years, lie untold others. Every tragedy crying out for more blood in its turn. It was an immensity of war the human mind cannot comprehend, and yet even within this tumult there were wars fought that were never meant to be known. On those fields fought shades of battle whose origins and goals were shrouded, even as their fellows fought in bold panoply, declaring either emperor or war master as their cause, somewhere little more than renegades and marauders, turncoats, byblows, others the shattered remnants of legions and armies spent like tears, the dead yet alive. Within the shadow wars they moved, and with them those who carried the secret writ of great powers, servants of the Sigillite and disciples of the Eye alike, working ruin in their wake. It was retribution that linked them all, those who sought it and those upon whom the blade would fall in payment for their sins, whether it was vengeance for fallen brothers, for a fallen father, a shattered oath, or simply for the murdered dream of unity in an age of darkness. When all else was lost, retribution was all that was left.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Heresy Grad School, where we're continuing on with our part 2. We'll call this part 2b, where we really want to get into some of the meat and potatoes of this section. Right after we hear the Consul Vigilator Sargon Viserys talk, specifically like the primary objectives, the secondary objectives, and also take a good look at these little vid captures that they have in these pages. So, Jason, you want to take it away?
Thanks, Pat. We'll be happy to do so. All right, so with this insertion, today we're going to talk about their primary and secondary objectives going on here. First off, their primary was the target infiltration and reconnaissance. So I love, Dave and I were talking about this earlier. Dave made a really good point. This little section is put together exactly like a little mission file with briefings, like we're reading it off of VidSlate and we're getting like little, enhanced, like zoom and enhance, and it's terrific. And pretty universally love it here at Heresy Grad School, because we are definitely nerds for a good zoom and enhance cliche, right? But our first little box out here is on that primary objective. So first off, 8 squads are being deployed here by Storm Eagle gunships into this wreckage of the Fortress Moon we talked about last time. And it's really, really shot to shit. To the point its structural and atmospheric integrity can't even be verified externally. All of the legionaries being suited up and going in are stuck into a battle-hardened or a void-hardened plate per standard Zone Mortalis engagement protocols. And they cut their way in through emergency airlocks at some of the farther bastions of the fortress, specifically because they're trying to avoid any active defenses around some of the more trafficked main hangar bays. So the airlock they cut in itself seems to be undamaged and bypassed. The station itself, as soon as they get into it, is pretty rough. A lot of it is attributable to small arms fire. Some definitely Legionis Astartes pattern bolt weaponry. Your standard bolt pistols, bolters. But as well, they're seeing some smaller caliber ballistic and energy weapons. And what's interesting here is some of the energy scarring they're discovering is actually unknown to their task leader, which I think is kind of an interesting thing here. However, one of the really old Terran veterans, a Sergeant Antonis out of his 4th insertion squad here, actually recognizes them as being very similar to some of the earliest patterns of Martian Volkite weaponry. And if you guys will remember way, way back during the Great Crusade, when there wasn't even designations between the Legion sobriquets, when it was just like the 1st Legion, the 3rd Legion, Martian pattern Volkite weaponry was the standard issue armament before bolt guns. So this is pretty interesting. It marks out here such weapons have not even been issued in numbers great enough to account for the blast marks observed in over a century. And actually, in this chapter, they hadn't had any such weapons in active service. So it's very odd to see energy scarring like that on this Night Lord's fortress, because if the Blood Angels don't have any of these weapons in service, a lot of the traitor legions probably would not have access to that weaponry either. So guys, what are we thinking here?
Yeah, I love this so much because it's it's almost like we're getting our first clue, this in this sort of mystery novel. We've got a sort of our detective on the scene, right, which is the consul vigilator Sargon Versaris, the Blood Angel, who's going in with his reconnaissance insertion force, and it's the old guy, the Terran veteran, who's like,
right?
He's like, no, I've seen these before, but it was 100 years ago.
Back in my day.
Yeah, and it even says that in the 9th chapter, so the Blood Angels task force that's going in here, they don't even have any of these Volkite weapons left in active service. So I love it that we're starting to get the little pieces of the puzzle here, and it's all done in sort of this first person, accessing files way that really, I think, spoke to all of us when we started putting these episodes together.
But I mean, I guess by this point in the timeline, it would make sense that Volkites are being phased out, and you see more I guess chapters in this case are using plasma and melta just because they're more easily mass produced. Or at least
Well, too.
that's what I'm thinking.
These aren't even like the normal Astartes pattern Volkite that are being used, by the legions in quote unquote modern days. These are like the original Martian kind that, were in service during like the very, very beginning years of the Great Crusade.
And it makes sense that they wouldn't have this pattern available anymore.
Right.
I mean, Mars was out of it for so long during the Heresy. And the other Forge worlds might not have been able to produce this type of, Volkite energy weaponry. So I think it makes sense that they sort of phased these out and went to the bolt rounds. But I love that they're adding in this level of nuance to what is essentially the timeline that goes back to the Great Crusade and the early days of unification, Terran veterans, and the original Legionis Astartes, and then how they and now AK looking back, accessing these files from well into the future, right after the siege, potentially post scouring. So it's very cool, very cool.
Well, dipping a little farther in here, Varsaris says that he's left one squad here to secure the airlock while the other squads of the insertion teams move further into the station proper. So a lot of the corridors here are shot to crap. They're littered with debris. Some of this debris has been sort of arranged to provide makeshift firing positions here. A lot of these, too, have been positioned in a way that kind of suggests the defenders have been trying to fend off assaults from a number of different directions instead of just one from the front. And they mentioned specifically, while it's a pretty complex undertaking, this is definitely a favored tactic for a number of legions, most notably the 16th and the 19th, the Sons of Horus and the Raven Guard. So a lot of corpses kind of scattered around too. Most are either Astartes from the Night Lords and their sort of retainers. Interestingly, the attacking force must have removed all of their own fallen because they're not finding any of them. Another sort of alarming fact, though, the Night Lords they're running across, due to the state of the bodies they're finding, it's pretty obvious this conflict has been conducted way, way before this insertion team got here. We're talking maybe a decade or more. But even so, the Night Lords they're coming across are having their progenoid glands removed, most likely by the attacking force. So, not only are these mysterious attackers removing their own dead to keep their presence a secret, they're also harvesting the progenoid glands of the Night Lords that they're attacking. So what are we thinking here, guys?
So my thing is I know something, but it has to wait until we get to it. But I do find it interesting. I mean, we can at least assume then that the Night Lords were probably defending against the not the Sons of Horus, because they would have probably been on the same side at this point, even though during kind of mid Scouring / Legion wars, the Sons of Horus were probably some of the most hated Legion, at least in the eye. But no, it's definitely interesting that they talk about the progenoid glands being removed, and that'll play a big part coming up, I think.
Well, Pat, that is a good point. If we're talking post-Scouring and into like M33 of the Legion Wars, a lot of that was essentially the legions fighting between each other and trying to chase down and exterminate the Sons of Horus. They were not looked upon favorably after what a lot of the other traitor legions saw as them breaking and fleeing and leaving everyone else out to dry at Terra.
Right.
But I don't know. The Sons of Horus are also pretty big dicks, so maybe they're just fighting anybody they come across.
Yeah, but this is also, I mean, where they are as far as like essentially the outskirts of this system. I mean, the system is even in the outskirts. It wouldn't make sense, or it doesn't make a logical sense for Sons of Horus to be out that far.
Yeah, we're in the outskirts of the outskirts. We're in the ghoul stars, here be dragons. But Jason, just I don't want to take anything for granted here, right? So I know a lot of our listeners are super smart and deep in the lore and as geeky, if not more than we are. But if this is not, your forte or whatever, I think we need to explain what a progenoid gland is used for, right? Like why do Space Marines, why do Legiones Astartes, why do they need that?
Well, in short, very, very short, because, I just had an idea. We should probably do a show at some point in the future about the implantation process.
Oh, yeah, would love that.
Right. Because I used to have one of those giant pull-out posters that shows like an anatomical breakdown of a Space Marine and all of like the implant glands and where they end up and what they do. But that's neither here nor there. A progenoid gland is pretty important for the reproduction of Space Marines, since obviously we're not kicking Space Marines out like rabbits. They're also called gene seeds, but they are one of the last implants surgically implanted in a neophyte to create a new Space Marine. So, again, in very, very short, it kind of coordinates with all of the other of the implants, and it allows, let's see, don't quote me on this, because it's been a little while and I'm doing this completely from memory without even a wiki to help me out. But I believe it's two, one placed in the throat and one placed in the chest, one of which is immature. So the mature progenoid kind of helps coordinate all of the other glands. The immature one eventually is harvested, so a single Space Marine can kind of help create two. One from his immature gland that grows to maturity and is harvested, the other from when he dies, it is taken out and repurposed.
If I remember correctly, and again, listeners, to quote Jason, don't quote me on this, I feel like the mature one is put in the chest so that it's protected by the black carapace, and then the immature is put into the neck.
That sounds correct.
Because in my mind, I'm remembering scenes of apothecaries extracting both, but going for the neck one first. But I could be wrong.
But either way, in short, what you need to know here, it's kind of like the biological command console for networking all of the other organs that are implanted into a Space Marine to get them to develop and mature properly from a neophyte into a fully fledged Astartes. So, having them pulled not only deprives the Night Lord's Legion of making new Astartes from that crop of gene seed, it also means somebody else is taking it in order to make their own. So, upon reaching the main hangar bays here, this is where they find like the greatest concentration of the dead here. There are actually several hundred auxilia and a slightly lesser number of Night Lords. But interestingly, the auxilia, and I'm not sure if they're speaking specifically about solar auxilia or just auxiliaries as in like mortal, hangers-on and militia of the Night Lords. But they seem to have been left where they fell, having been slain as they fled. A lot of them have seen to cast their weapons aside, and they're showing massive bolt shell wounds in their backs. The main hangar bay is actually damaged to hell as well. Las cutters, melta bombs, and apparently from the concentration of damage, they can determine that this is where the attacking force probably entered in mass. There's just this volume of blast markers around the point of entry that show this is probably like the section of staunchest defense from the Night Lords as well. Pretty much all of the hangar bays and all of the storage vaults, for staging areas for supplies around them, have been stripped of salvageable materials just way before this insertion team gets here. So, and it was apparently pretty thorough too, because from just the complete, clean strippedness of some of these storage vaults, it's pretty clear that whoever was doing it took their time with it and didn't really fear any sort of retaliation from the Night Lords. So chances are, at this point, they had destroyed them so utterly, they didn't really fear any sort of retaliation. And that would be the bulk of their primary objective with this insertion team.
Yeah, I think we've just definitely gotten some pretty big clues as to who's conducting this, right? Probably either from the 16th Legion or the 19th Legion, and they came in and they were looking for not only just materiel, but it seems like they're going after the means to also to reproduce, right? Reproduce themselves, and we don't know why yet, but this is all part of the mystery, right? It's just very, very cool. And if you go down to the bottom of that, sort of the data slate, you can see some really grainy vid caps of what the Blood Angels were encountering as they moved through. So there's that hangar bay in the bottom left where you can see it's been stripped and there's just some bodies lying around. And then the upper right hand, you've got another grainy vid pic of what looks like a dead Night Lord, but it's very grim. It's very dark. So,
yeah, I'm trying to figure out from the chest plate what armor that is. That's not. Jason, help me out here. It's got the middle breather piece and the tubes coming around it.
Looks like a Mark IV.
Okay, so I was thinking the correct thing. I just didn't want to say it in case one of the listeners told me I was wrong.
Yeah, because it's got that solid breastplate,
Mm-hmm.
and it's got the cabling branching off in 4, different cables from that central connector, which is kind of common with a lot of the plates. But the cabling with Mark V is a little chunkier and a little more obvious, where Mark VI has a single plate across the pectorals and then like a secondary plate across the abdominals with a 3-point cable connector instead of a 4-point.
That's right. And it wouldn't be Mark III or Mark II because neither one of them had that's almost like a cod piece directly coming off of the chest piece, or that is actually part of the chest piece. If I remember correctly, both of those had actual just metal plates hanging off of it.
Both of those are a lot broader too.
Yeah.
The Mark IV plate, you can definitely see it's a Mark IV shoulder plate off on the top end there.
Yeah.
They have that very slim line trim to it.
And there isn't really anything at the head, although it looks like it's just a skeleton's head. It doesn't look like it actually has a helmet to it. But if you squint and enhance and enhance and enhance, but yeah, so just utter wreckage. And just nothing left.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of wreckage, excellent segue into the secondary objective here, which for the insertion team is data acquisition. So their final target here on Tenebor is the command spire where the cogitator banks for the entire complex are housed. So just like everywhere else, this is showing a lot of extensive signs of combat. But what's interesting here, it's a large number of remains from Night Lords and some of their auxilia. But this appears to be more of a protracted sort of engagement. So it might have been where the last of the garrison of the Fortress Moon kind of made their last stand. A lot of corpses here, too, seem like they've been killed in different places and sort of dragged from the fighting to either be treated in this sort of central garrison, or to allow new troops to move back into the action. So again, those are clues that kind of seem to suggest a protracted struggle for control of the entire area, with the Night Lords kind of fighting to the last, which is pretty out of character for them. So this was obviously, kind of an important objective for them to hang on to. So past the main entry ports there, the insertion team doesn't find a whole lot of evidence of further fighting, save once they get to the very center of the control spire, they find the headless corpse of a praetor of the Night Lords. There's sort of a lack of collateral damage in the surrounding area, where up until this point, there have been bolt shell craters, energy scarring all over the place. So between that and that the fact the praetor is headless, it suggests an honor duel conducted that results in the death of the praetor, and maybe that his head was even claimed as a trophy by whoever killed him.
Yeah. So what that makes me think of is, that this is vengeance, right? This is more than just an opportunistic raid on a facility that obviously has material and potentially other things of value for this force, but that this is retribution, right? This is the only other time I can think of, right, where a head is claimed is on the sands of Istvan 5, right? And so I feel like this probably harkens back to that, right? So it's an allusion to some struggle that predates this encounter.
There is a legion out there whose entire motto at this point is what is it? Vengeance is victory. Just a thought. As we move into the second half here. So the cogitator banks here are showing a lot of signs of forced access. Fortunately, a lot of that data is still accessible and recoverable for the insertion team. So as they search for information relating to where the Night Lords are sort of concentrated in the sector, they're also looking to kind of identify whatever this mysterious attacking force is. So they find the information they're looking for on Night Lord's positions, though unfortunately it's 10 years or more old. But what's kind of wacky is the station's records are recording a lot of these positions as hostile. So they're thinking maybe this is sort of a sign of internal strife within the 8th Legion. They are pretty common to hear, events of internecine conflicts. So also, this information they're retrieving is kind of tagged with some telltale signs of having been accessed forcefully, presumably by the force that overtook and sacked the station. So the last little bit we have here is the commanding officer's remarks. So of the station's attackers, all that could be really retrieved were some very grainy photos. These aren't super helpful. It does help them identify kind of what they already knew. The attacking force is a force of Legionis Astartes, but they're bearing a completely unknown heraldry of red and black, and the sigils they're wearing are unknown, which is pretty weird at this time. Of course, there are little splinter factions here and there of different Shattered Legions forces banding together, but at least those are they don't really have their own identity. They're sort of small splinters of other, legions that have come together for survival. Now, two, these images from paired with sort of the evidence as they're, surveying the base, this attacking force is not light. It's multi-company strength. They have at least a full detachment of cataphractii terminators. They've got specialist boarding and infiltration troops. However, the images recorded show mostly Mark II and Mark III plate. So some of the older marks, where the Night Lords here, like as we can see from our own, little captures we have going on, are equipped with what looks like newer battle plate. But this attacking force, even though they have older marks of battle plate like 2 and 3, they're showing a lot of non-standard alterations. Now, while they are engaging in destroying this defending garrison, which was numbered here at over 1,000 auxiliary troops and about 300 Night Lords, and disappearing, you got to remember this Fortress Moon was designed to hold a massive portion of the Legion. It's actually supposed to be large enough to accommodate almost half of the Night Lord's Legion. And the Night Lords are definitely, if not one of the largest legions, they're definitely in the top, half when it comes to legion sizing. But it's garrisoned by just 1,000 mortal auxiliary troops and 300 Night Lords. Now, they can't find any information on where this mysterious force was or its current loyalty. So, unfortunately, the only thing they can really conclude is that even though this attacking force is going after a known traitor legion, it still has to be classified as a potential hazard to the Blood Angels fleet.
Yeah, and then right below that, we get our first look at the Dark Legion chapter. We don't know who sort of perpetrated this strike, right? And it's the first time we get to see sort of some iconography and heraldry there in very sort of grainy capture, but I love the way they did this. It's just so cool. And I think, it's very cool too that the Blood Angels captain still sort of remains ignorant, right? He doesn't have access to sort of the data files, so he's just sort of compiling them. And the whole purpose of this inquiry that AK is undergoing here, right? Going back into the archives, because that's what he is. He's an archivist, right? For the Divisio Militaris, or some, entity in the Administratum back on Terra, some time after this. So to me, that suggests that, as the Imperium starts to go out and reclaim lost territory that was lost during the Heresy, that there's still a lot they don't know. And the reason for this inquiry by the Divisio Militaris is we still don't know what happened to the Nostromo sector. And we don't know if we should go out and send fleets out there. We don't know if we should try to repopulate lost worlds. And so they're just accessing these data archives to try to answer this huge question, this huge, gap in knowledge. And, we don't know how many people even know this reconnaissance element captured some of this footage. So it's very cool. It's very, I'm really excited to get into the rest of it, because we learn a lot more. But
yeah, no, you took the words right out of my mouth, Dave. And again, we'll definitely be getting into the who and what soon. One of the things I thought was interesting at the very top of the vid capture is you have that alpha there. I don't know if anybody else noticed it. Kind of reminds me of the Alpha Legion symbol just ever so slightly, but just a random thought.
One thing I thought was a little interesting about that vid capture is they say specifically most of the images recovered show older marks of battle plate, mostly Mark II and III, but this is pretty clearly Mark IV plate, both the helmet and the shoulder pad there.
Yeah, it's got the 3 grills and that angular nose and that is interesting. So maybe, this could have been whoever had that honor duel with the Praetor even, but we may find out later, we may not.
Spooky.
Right. All right. I think that's it for us, guys. But we hope you've enjoyed listening to this second part of part 2 with us. Jason, Dave, do you guys have anything else to add?
No, not really, but just if you guys have been listening and you like what we're doing, just let us know. Obviously, we're trying some new stuff out here with this sort of this coverage. When we get into the next lesson across Ashen Trails, you guys are going to hear, I think, at least one new voice. So if that's something that speaks to you guys, I would love to hear about it. And if it's just something that you find distracting or off, also please let us know. So I'm sure we won't make Pat stress out so much about it.
Woo! But no, yeah, like Dave said, if you guys enjoy the different narrators that we're trying to use, and or if you don't even, like, just drop us a comment or a message, just so we know, we're doing something right. But yeah, no, I think that's it. Thank you for listening. Now fuck off, Craig.
Fuck straight off, Craig.